Today I'm going to be showing you guys two different approaches when it comes to making your own lo-fi drum loops, a minimalist approach and a maximalist approach. Both of these methods have their pros and cons and allow you to do different things in your lo-fi beats. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the best times to be using each of these approaches and ultimately make better lo-fi beats. Alright, so we're going to start off first with the minimalist approach, but once again guys, my drum kit is available to download in the description box below for those interested. Like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. Alright, so we have our main loop playing here. Now we're going to start adding some drums. What I'm going to do now is start off with the hi-hats. Typically I would advise starting with either the hi-hats or the snares just because they are a little bit more character dense and they will really dictate what types of sounds we can use in our lo-fi drum loop. So with a minimalist approach to our drum loop, what we don't want is a hi-hat that sounds like this, just because it's going to end up taking a lot more room in our beat. What we want is a hi-hat that takes a minimal amount of room in the beat, so this type of hi-hat here would just work a lot better. A staple in lo-fi beats is that it feels a little bit aged and worn out and there isn't much high-end polish. So I'm going to take an EQ here and get rid of a lot of the high end with this hi-hat. I'm going to get rid of some of the low end too, just to help thin the sample out a little bit more. Next up, I'm going to layer a shaker underneath this hi-hat just to add a little bit more character. If you guys watch my previous videos, I talk about this concept a lot, about character. So even though it sounds like these layers don't take up much room in our beat, since we are doing a minimalist approach, this is exactly what we're looking for. Next up, we will move on to the snare. Again, since we are doing a minimalist type of approach to our drum loop, a sound like this is the opposite of what we're looking for, so this won't work. So I found this snare here. As you guys can hear, it's just not as dense, a little bit more minimal. Now I'm going to start EQing just like what we did with the hi-hats, just to get rid of some of those frequencies that we don't need and help it feel a little bit more lo-fi. So as you guys can hear, feeling very minimal, very lo-fi. What I did is I just completely rooted out a lot of the high end, got rid of a lot of the low end as well, just extreme cuts here. Now it just sounds a lot more lo-fi. Also, what I ended up doing was I took this rim sound here and I just layered it underneath the snare, so now this is how it sounds. Again, just very minimal, not taking up much room in the beat, but again, this is exactly what we want. Moving on to the kicks, again, this is a type of kick that we don't want. Just way too big, takes up way too much room. We want something minimal. So here's a kick that I eventually came up with here. Again, a lot smaller and a lot more minimal. Next, I added this shaker here with a little bit of a different pattern, just to take a little bit more room up and add a little bit more of a different rhythm. Again, not overpowering at all, not giving them much room. So the next step here is something very important. What I did was I added tape static. Now a lot of people use this for aesthetic reasons, but when we break it down, it's also very important in another way. We went to our hi-hats, snares, everything, and we cut a lot of high end off. So it's going to sound very unbalanced in our beat. There's going to be a huge gap in the high end that just sounds like there's a huge void there. There's not much going on. So what a tape effect does when you add that static in is it really takes up a lot of that high end presence in the beat. So if I open up an EQ on our beat that doesn't have this tape sound on it, you can see the high end here is just lacking a little bit. It's not as balanced. But once I turn on the tape effect, now you can see there's just a lot more balance overall. This overall EQ line just feels a little bit more straight, and we have a lot more of a balance in our beat. And that's why this tape sound is super important in our beat. It's not just an aesthetic tool that just helps to bring another cool layer into our beat. It actually has a purpose in our beat and it helps bring an overall balance that's going to be lacking in our lo-fi beat if we didn't use it. So with the minimalist approach to our drum loop, this is pretty much an advantage. We don't really have to do too much. This beat already sounds full as it is, but there are disadvantages as well. The only reason why this works is because we have so many other layers in our beat. If, for example, I turned off everything but the main loop, Now you'll hear that this beat sounds very sparse and not as dense and complete. So as you guys can hear, the other sounds that I added, the other layers that I added into this beat really did a lot of the heavy lifting. So that allowed me to be a little bit more minimal with my drums. So when it comes to using this method, it's best to use it when you have a sample that's very dense, that has a lot going on. And you can just go in and add a minimal amount of drums and the beat will sound full. Or if you have the ability to add your own layers on top. Otherwise, what I would recommend, if you have a very simple layer, a very simple sample that you want to work around, a maximalist approach might be better for you. So this is a beat that I made in Machine a long time ago. What I'll do now is just play the main loop for you guys, the main sample. Now to do this technique, what we're going to do is start off by using a drum loop like the one that we have here. The drums don't fill up as much room in the beat as I like, as you guys can hear. We need these drums to do a little bit more in the beat. In the last beat, we used our mixing tools in order to minimalize our drums. In this beat, we're going to do the exact opposite. We're going to use our mixing tools in order to maximize our drums. So what I did was I duplicated the drum loop here and I added a saturation / compression effect on top. And this is how the additional layer sounds. As you guys can hear, it just sounds a lot more dense and a lot more full compared to our prior drum loop. And now when I add both the loops together, it just sounds like it takes up a ton more room in the beat. So this is how it sounds with just the initial layer. Doesn't take up that much room, and then when I add the second layer. Next up, what I did was I added even more layers. I have this additional kick layer, another hi-hat layer, as well as a snare layer. Again, since we're trying to maximize the amount of room that these drums take up in the beat, our prerogative here is just to add tons and tons of more textures to our drum loop, just to, again, fill out the beat a lot more. If I isolate these drums, you can almost hear it's just like I added a completely another layer of minimalist drums to this beat. Now the advantage to this method is that we don't really need to do much with our sample. Once again, this is how the sample sounds on its own. There's really not much going on in our progression. The bass doesn't take up much room in the beat as well. But as soon as I add my drum layer into the beat just sounds really full and very balanced. One of the disadvantages though is that if we were to try to go in and add additional layers to this beat, the drums are just taking up so much room that we can't really get away with adding tons and tons of stuff on top. And there you go guys, those are two different types of approaches when it comes to your lo-fi drums, a minimalist and a maximalist approach. If you guys liked the video, please do like and subscribe, leave a comment down below, let me know which of these styles you prefer when you make your lo-fi beats, and I will see you guys next Tuesday.